The heat from the tarmac rose in shimmering waves, wrapping around me like an invisible cloak as the jet's door lowered. My heels clicked against the metal steps, sharp, deliberate. The scent of jet fuel mixed with the faint trace of my perfume, and for a moment, I savored it. Freedom has a smell, and for me, it's somewhere between leather seats and victory. I adjusted the cuff of my silk blouse, the fabric cool against my skin despite the August sun. In the distance, a small group stood by the airport fence. Faces I knew all too well. The ones who had smirked, whispered, even laughed. That day I climbed onto the city bus, clutching my worn-out handbag like it was armor. My phone buzzed in my palm. A text from my assistant. They're here. Of course they were. The meeting they insisted on having, the one they expected me to attend in their office, had been relocated. I'd invited them here instead. I watched their expressions shift as I stepped down onto the glossy black tarmac. From disbelief to something else. The wind caught my hair, lifting it like a slow-motion scene from a film, but I didn't break eye contact.
Not with them.
Not for a second. They used to see me as the girl who couldn't afford a taxi. Today, they were seeing something else entirely. And if I was being honest, I'd been waiting for this moment longer than I cared to admit. It wasn't just that day. The laughter had started long before. Back then, my life fit inside a second-hand tote bag, frayed straps, one broken zipper. I was 22, fresh out of college, with more dreams than money, and living in a cramped one-room apartment above a noisy chai shop. Every morning, I'd walk past the row of glossy cars parked outside my colleagues' homes, only to stand at the bus stop, dust settling on my clothes before the day had even begun. The morning that still burns in my memory was the day of my first big presentation. I had stayed up all night perfecting the slides, ironing the only blazer I owned. But when I arrived at the bus stop, there they were, 3 of my coworkers, leaning against a polished sedan, sipping coffee like they were in an ad. One of them, Rita, gave me a slow once-over, then smirked. Didn't know we still had public transport ambassadors in this office. The others laughed, not loud, but loud enough. I laughed too, or at least I tried. That brittle, pretend kind of laugh that tastes like metal in your mouth. When the bus came, I climbed aboard, the cracked vinyl seat creaking under me. My hands shook as I gripped the folder in my lap, not from the bumps in the road, but from the sting of being reminded, again, that I didn't belong in their world. That night, after the meeting, which I nailed, by the way, though no one clapped, I stopped by my grandmother's house. She was sitting on the veranda, knitting in the fading light. She didn't ask why my eyes were red. She just pressed something into my palm, a small, old-fashioned key on a faded red ribbon. "This is for the day you have a door worth locking," she said. "Until then, you keep going. Quietly if you must, but keep going." I didn't understand then, not fully, but that key stayed with me. In my tote bag, then my wallet, then tucked into a drawer, in every tiny room I ever rented. It wasn't gold. It wasn't magic. But somehow, it made me feel like my story wasn't over. Like maybe someday I'd be the one holding the keys to something more. And that night, lying awake in the heat, I made a promise. To her. To myself. They could laugh all they wanted. One day, I'd give them something real to stare at. The first step wasn't glamorous. It was a cramped desk in the corner of a dusty co-working space that smelled faintly of burnt coffee and photocopier ink. I had taken a part-time admin job at a small import firm, just enough to cover rent and groceries. But the real reason I said yes was because they let me sit in on business meetings. I'd watch the owner negotiate deals with suppliers, the way his voice stayed calm even when the numbers weren't in his favor. It was there I met her, Noreen Khan. She was the firm's top consultant, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, the room listened. One evening, when everyone else had left, she stopped by my desk. "You take notes in those meetings," she said. "But you're not just writing words. You're catching the rhythm of the deal. You ever think of doing this for yourself?" I laughed, a soft, tired laugh. "With what money?" She smiled, slid a business card across the desk. "Not Everything starts with money. Sometimes it starts with the right question. From that day on, I became her shadow. She taught me how to read market trends, how to build relationships without begging for them, and how to walk into a room like I already owned the table. The nights were the hardest. My tiny apartment turned into my second office. The same mug of coffee went cold 3 times before I'd remember to drink it. My nails chipped from peeling shipping labels. My hair smelled faintly of printer toner more often than shampoo. The wins came slowly. My first freelance client, a struggling boutique that I helped turn profitable within 6 months. My first international supplier who trusted me enough to give me credit terms. My first bank account where the balance didn't give me anxiety. And all the while I stayed quiet. Social media showed filtered sunsets and occasional coffee cups. Nothing that hinted at the deals I was closing. The late-night strategy calls. The slow but steady climb. My old colleagues still saw me as the bus girl. And I let them. Within 3 years, I had my own small consultancy. Within 5, I was flying out twice a month, not for vacations, but for expansion. Deals in Dubai, suppliers in Singapore, clients in London. I learned the art of flying under the radar. No bragging, no announcements. But the real shift came the day I bought my jet. Not a gift from anyone. Not a lucky break. Every payment, every signature, every drop of fuel paid for by me. The key my grandmother had given me? It hung in the jet's cabin, right above the bar, not because it opened any door here, but because it reminded me of the first door I ever dreamed of. I didn't tell a soul. Not until I had a reason. And when the reason finally came, it wasn't business. It was personal. The hangar smelled faintly of polished steel and jet fuel. Clean, sharp, powerful. My assistant had arranged everything. The polished black SUV waiting at the entrance, the jet gleaming under the overhead lights, the seating area set with fresh flowers and perfectly chilled water bottles. I could see them before they saw me. Rida and the others, the same trio from the bus stop years ago, now dressed in carefully curated business attire. They stood clustered together, clutching leather folders, eyes darting around the hangar like tourists who'd wandered into the wrong part of the airport. The echo of my heels on the concrete floor made them turn. For a moment, there was silence. Then the confusion spread across their faces, like ink in water. Hi, Rida said finally, her tone caught between a greeting and a question. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I set my handbag down on the sleek side table, shrugged off my blazer, and poured myself a glass of water. I let the silence stretch, not unkindly, but deliberately. You own this place? One of the men asked, his eyes flicking from the jet to the SUV to the control panel glowing in the corner. I smiled, taking a slow sip. Not the hangar. Just the jet. The words landed like a dropped glass. Their gazes moved as if trying to confirm it, tracing the custom paintwork, the polished chrome, the discreet but unmistakable logo of my company near the door. You're flying somewhere? Rida asked, still trying to piece it together. I just got back, I said, glancing at my watch. London meeting ran long. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was remembering, I could tell, the girl with the scuffed heels and bus ticket in her pocket. One of the men cleared his throat. We didn't know things were going so well for you. That's because I didn't tell you, I replied evenly. You didn't ask. There it was, that flicker in their eyes. Guilt. Maybe shame. Certainly surprise. I gestured toward the jet. Come inside. It's quieter. They followed me up the steps, moving slowly, their eyes wide as the interior revealed itself. Cream leather seats, soft ambient lighting, polished wood paneling. No unnecessary flash, but every inch radiated success. My success. We sat around the conference table built into the center. I rested my hands on the smooth surface, meeting each of their eyes in turn. You invited me to your office to discuss a partnership, I began. But I thought it might be better to meet here, since we're not really starting as equals. Rida flinched, a small movement, but I saw it. This isn't about revenge, I continued. It's about perspective. Years ago, you laughed when I took the bus. And that's fine. We were all younger, a little thoughtless. But what you didn't know was that I was building something. Slowly. Quietly. On my own terms. Silence. The only sound was the low hum of the air system. I leaned back, letting the moment breathe. So, before we talk business, I want you to understand who you're dealing with now. I slid a slim folder across the table, the same way my first mentor had slid me her card all those years ago. Inside were figures, contracts, and an overview of my company's holdings. Their eyes scanned the pages, and I watched the realization set in. Not just a jet, not just a hangar, but an empire. When they finally looked up, no one was smiling. I let them finish reading before I spoke again. Their eyes didn't meet mine now. They stayed fixed on the papers as if they could hide inside the numbers. This partnership, I began slowly, isn't impossible. But it comes with conditions. Ryda's brow furrowed. Conditions? Yes, I said, folding my hands on the table. 3 of them. And they're not negotiable. I could see the instinctive defensiveness rising in them, so I held up a hand. If you're here just for profit, we're done. But if you're willing to change the way you operate, we might both benefit. I leaned forward slightly, keeping my tone calm but unyielding. First, I said, respect is non-negotiable for everyone, at every level. I don't work with companies where interns are treated like furniture and where mocking someone's financial situation is considered humor. That ends today. Ryda's gaze dropped to her lap. Second, I continued, community reinvestment. 5% of profits from this deal will go toward training programs for underprivileged youth, particularly women, in business and negotiation skills. If you want to work with me, you're going to help build something that outlives this contract. One of the men shifted uncomfortably. 5% is. It's not a suggestion. I cut in, voice still level. It's the cost of working with me. Third, I said, letting the pause stretch just long enough for them to look at me again. Personal accountability. I want each of you to set one concrete goal for growth, not in profit, but in character. It could be improving how you lead, fixing the culture in your teams, or even the way you see people outside your social circle. And I will be checking in on it. They exchanged glances, unsure whether to be offended or grateful. This isn't about holding the past over your head, I said more softly. It's about making sure the people I work with aren't the same people who would have laughed at the girl on the bus. I've worked too hard, built too much, to invite that energy back into my life. For a long moment, no one said a word. The jet hummed around us, a quiet, steady reminder of where I was now and how far I'd come. Finally, Ryda nodded. If we agree to all this, will you work with us? I gave a small smile. If you agree and you follow through. Because I won't hesitate to walk away. Not anymore. It wasn't bravado. It was truth. I had spent years building my own doors, my own keys, my own runway. I didn't need theirs. They each nodded slowly, the weight of the conditions settling in. Whether they realized it or not, they'd just agreed to more than a business deal. They'd agreed to change. And that, I thought, was worth more than any contract. Change didn't happen overnight. But over the next few months, I saw small shifts, the kind that matter. Ryda began mentoring 2 junior associates, women who reminded me of myself at 22. One of the men started a weekly team lunch where everyone, from interns to senior staff, sat at the same table. And when the first 5% profit donation went through, they didn't just sign the check. They came with me to meet the young women it would fund. I wasn't naive. People don't transform completely just because they've been called out. But they were trying, and that was enough for me to keep the door, my door, open. One evening, after another round of meetings, I found myself alone in the jet. The sun was setting, streaking the sky in gold and violet. I reached up to the small hook near the bar and took down the old key my grandmother had given me. It was worn now, the ribbon fraying at the edges. I turned it over in my hand, remembering that hot night on her veranda, the smell of jasmine in the air, the sound of her knitting needles clicking. This is for the day you have a door worth locking. I smiled, realizing something. The door had never been the jet or the office or the bank account. It was me. My boundaries. My choices. My life. I slipped the key back onto its hook, feeling the engines hum beneath my feet as the pilot prepared for takeoff. Outside, the runway lights blinked in the deepening dusk, leading into the dark like a promise. I thought about the girl on the bus, sweaty, nervous, clutching her folder so tightly it creased. I wished I could reach back through time, take her hand and whisper, "One day, they'll laugh for a different reason." As the jet lifted from the ground, the city lights twinkled below like scattered gold. I leaned back in my seat, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. And in that moment, I knew I didn't need anyone else's approval or validation or applause. The journey itself had been the applause. They laughed when I took the bus. But when I stepped out of my jet, they finally saw the woman who'd been flying all along.